Good afternoon. I would love to welcome you to this Creative Pathfinders event with the School of Music. And I'd like to begin by thanking some of my colleagues for their support of this webinar series. A special thank you to Clara Davison and her team in the Office of Advancement in the College of Arts and Sciences for facilitating these webinar events. And also to Kevin Leonardi, Senior Director of Marketing and Communications, and our Digital Accessibilities Coordinator, Christopher Wallace, for their support with the Barnett Center website. A special thanks to Alison Kaboski at the Barnett Center for her amazing work throughout the Creative Pathfinders initiative. And I would like to thank Professor and Interim Director of the School of Music, Eugenia Costa Giomi, for her enthusiastic support of this webinar event. Creative Pathfinders was envisioned as a way to strengthen our connection to the alumni network in the arts and design as we celebrate the unique contributions of our alumni within their respective fields. And perhaps now more than ever, to remember why we need the arts, I wanted to make a space through Creative Pathfinders where we can turn towards each other and take some time to marvel at the courageous and singular career paths of each of the alumni that will join us in this series. As I introduce our panelists today, you will find their short bios in the chat box within your Zoom window. Alumnus Antoine T. Clark is the Assistant Conductor of the Chicago Sinfonietta and is the founding Artistic Director and Music Director of the McConnell Arts Center Chamber Orchestra, along with a very rich list of other accomplishments. And alumna Maria Finkelmeier is a percussionist, composer, public artist, educator, and arts entrepreneur. She is an associate professor at the Berklee College of Music and a lecturer at the Northeastern University Music Industry Leadership Program. They will be joined in conversation today by Dr. Scott A. Jones, who is a professor in the School of Music at OSU. Scott is also the Associate Director of Bands in the School of Music at The Ohio State University. In addition to conducting the symphonic band, he also leads the undergraduate conducting curriculum and serves as director of the very awesome Ohio State Youth Summer Music Programs. We will begin by having Antoine Clark introduce his creative practice, followed by a similar overview by Maria Finkelmeier. This will establish the foundation for a series of follow-up questions from Scott Jones. There will be time towards the end of the hour for questions from our audience, and we really do encourage your questions, so please submit them within the Q&A function as they arise. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation. Truly, it's very exciting to have everyone here today. Thank you for joining us. I'll hand it over now to Antoine as he shares some thoughts with us about his professional pathway. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. So I would like to take this time to give you a little rundown on my career path after graduating from The Ohio State University in 2009 with a doctorate in clarinet performance. When I was a student at Ohio State in my doctoral studies, in that second year, I took on a position as adjunct instructor of woodwinds at Kenyon College. And I wanted to just make sure you know that because it kind of ties into just my body of work. So as a second year doctoral student, I took that job. After graduating in 2009, from my doctorate, I took a position as interim assistant professor of woodwinds at Wayne State College in Nebraska. And this job was really involved. I taught woodwinds. I was the orchestra director. I taught music history and music appreciation, chamber music, and orchestration. This position, as I mentioned, was an interim position. And the hope was that I could apply for the job again for the tenure track position. Well, I did in fact do that after teaching for a year, and I was awarded the tenure track job. But because I wasn't sure how I would like my position there, and I didn't know how well my colleagues and students would like me, I had to apply for other jobs And so I was a finalist for another job in Texas around the time I was notified that I had actually been given the tenure track position. And that was a very difficult decision for me because the job in Texas was a little bit more streamlined. It would involve teaching only clarinet rather than the many hats that I was doing in my job in Nebraska, which is something I really actually love doing because of the versatility. But we'll get around to talking about a little bit more why I left that job. I moved back to Columbus, and then I resumed the teaching positions and connections performing with local orchestra. So as I mentioned before, Kenyon College is where I was teaching, so they allowed me to come back and take over my teaching responsibilities there. However, giving up that position in Nebraska was a very sort of a depressing thing for me. I wasn't sure if I would ever realize my goal of being a full-time professor again. But things started to move forward. I made connections with local teachers. I taught some woodwind classes for local bands. And I took another position as an adjunct professor for Denison University in 2012. I also founded a woodwind quintet with colleagues or classmates that I had gone to school with at Ohio State. And that was the Apollo Winds. And that basically opened the door for me to explore my conducting. The Apollo Winds played a concert at the McConnell Art Center in Worthington, Ohio. And at that concert, board members expressed to me that they loved the fact that we had they got to see classical programming at the center. I think the center was only 2 years old at the time, and they were having these weekly shows, but no classical programming. With that in mind, I decided to write up a proposal to start a chamber orchestra there because I had a sincere interest in conducting and actually had studied it quite a bit as in my other degrees. So I founded the McConnell Arts Center in 2013. We're in our 8th season, I'm happy to say. But before I talk a little bit more about that, I'll talk about the second stage of my education at Ohio State University. So in 2013 actually, I decided to go back and do postdoctoral studies in conducting. A year later, I enrolled in the Master's of Music program as an orchestral conducting student. In terms of my orchestral conducting education, I did the Masters from 2014 to 2016. I attended 15 conducting workshops, festivals, or competitions from 2015 to 2019. I became the assistant conductor of the Gateways Music Festival, which is in partnership with the Eastman School of Music from 2017 to 2019. And between 2016 and 2018, I had the fortune of auditioning for some of the nation's top orchestras as assistant conductor. In 2018, I became a fellow with the Chicago Sinfonietta in their Project Inclusion Conducting Freeman Fellowship Program. I did that for 2 years. Since those studies, I have taken on some appointments as a conductor. As I mentioned, I started the McConnell Arts Center in 2013. In 2018, I became the wind orchestra director of the Northern Ohio University. I did that for 1 year before being asked to take over their orchestral program. So now I'm the orchestra director at Ohio Northern University. In 2019, I was also asked to join the faculty to become the director of the school's chamber orchestra. And in 2019, I also became the music director of the Philharmonia Orchestra, which is under the Northern Ohio Youth Orchestras program, which is based at Oberlin Conservatory. In 2020, this past year, I became the assistant conductor of the Chicago Sinfonietta. I have done some other work as a conductor, guest conducting with orchestras throughout the United States. And fortunately, I'm happy to say that I've been able to even be involved in service. So I am a board member of the Columbus children's choir. So that's a compact story about where I've gone since 2009 and back to Ohio State in 2014. So now I turn this over to my friend, Maria.
Thanks so much, Antoine. It's so fantastic to hear your story. And I love this idea of kind of major pivots in your life happening because of these people you're meeting. And to think of, we were sharing the stage at Weigel Hall back in the early 2000s, and it's really exciting to hear what you're up to now. Thanks so much for having me, Ohio State. It's lovely to be back. I am here in Boston in my studio currently, but my heart is always a Buckeye, don't worry. I'm a percussionist, a composer, and a public artist. And what that means to me is I create multi-sensory events at art galleries, at museums, at concert halls, as well as in the public space. I run my own company called MF Dynamics, which consists of a cohort of many collaborators, from visual artists to animators to administrators, poets, and so on. And I bring together these people to create these multi-sensory events under my vision. And I also run a nonprofit. So I've had the honor to create educational experiences at schools and community centers throughout the New England area through this nonprofit, as well as produce some festivals and events there. And it's been a long and winding road to sit here today, very fulfilling. And I'd love to share a little bit with you so you can kind of imagine yourself following some sort of curvy path, just as I have. I graduated from Ohio State, and when did I graduate? I have it written down. 2007. There we go. I have a Bachelor of Music and Percussion Performance. And I recall during that undergraduate experience, diving so deeply into my studies and always asking myself questions such as, why music and for whom? And those two questions have really kind of stayed with me throughout my career. And I continue to ask myself those questions all the time. Those are the questions I ask myself to make new decisions, to create new projects, and to try to best navigate what next steps are coming ahead of me. And at that time, why music and for whom? I didn't feel like I wasn't ready to jump out into the world yet. So I decided to pursue a master's degree. I received a master's in percussion performance and literature from the Eastman School of Music just after going to Ohio State. And both of the institutions have really fulfilled my artistic niche and really, really pushed me deeply technically and musically. After my experience in my master's degree, I asked myself, why music and for whom? And this was the moment, right, of, okay, do I step into a career path? How do I become, do I go get a DMA? Do I teach in schools? Do I freelance? What is next? And essentially, I felt that this question of the why music, I wasn't ready to answer that because I didn't really know where my musical voice was. I felt that I needed to explore more of my own self and my own voice, essentially. I wanted to become a composer, an improviser. What would it take to really harness the technical musical ability that I had gained through my education and fulfill it in some way that was unique to me? And what I decided is that I needed an experience to push me. I wasn't done learning, but I wasn't excited about a doctorate degree at the time. So what I did through actually my professor, Dr. Susan Powell at Ohio State, and my professors at Eastman, is I connected with a mentor in Sweden named Anders Östrand. I met Anders while at Ohio State, he's a great improviser and composer. And I emailed him and I said, hey, can I come study with you? What would that look like? I've heard people move to Sweden to study with you. Can we talk more about that? And we responded. He actually also did a residency at Eastman at that time. And we got to talking and created this opportunity that I could move to Sweden. And my idea was for a semester to take postgraduate study. And I say this very simply, it took months and months of paperwork, of phone calls, of emails, of fear, of risk-taking to kind of create the rubric. But eventually I was accepted into a university in northern Sweden as a postgraduate student, which I could just take lessons with Anders. So after I graduated from Eastman, I found the funds. It was all very difficult. Found the funds, got the visa, got the permission to go to Sweden, intended to stay for a semester, ended up staying 3 years. And I stayed 3 years for a variety of reasons. One, it was extremely personally challenging to be in a country that I knew nothing. I lived near the North Pole, not North Pole, the Arctic Circle, essentially. So very close to the, upper hemisphere. And it was dark all winter. It was light all summer. I was learning a new language. I felt that extremely engaged. I was very engaged to be not in a comfortable space. It felt very challenging to learn so much, not only as musically, but also culturally, personally, all those things. Under Anders' mentorship, I started a percussion trio, and then also toured with orchestras. After a couple of years in Sweden, I had this other why music and for whom, and I realized I needed to be back in the States to create work close to my family, and I also needed a salary. So I applied for a position at New England Conservatory. It's true. I needed some really like savings, and I became the program manager of the entrepreneurial musicianship department at New England Conservatory. I held that job from 2012 to 2015, which was fantastic. I learned a lot about administrative work. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about Boston, and then left that position in 2015 to do what I'm currently doing, which is create projects, teach, perform, and hopefully continue to ask myself those questions of why music and for whom by creating work out in the public space that is, and creative endeavors that are really close to my heart. So that's kind of the really quick overview of Antoine and myself. We are so looking forward to this conversation, and I look forward to continuing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria and Antoine. We are so delighted to have you back here on campus at Ohio State and taking part in this conversation. We've got a lot of people attending in our audience today, many of whom are students who obviously I'm deeply connected with. And I wondered if we could start our conversation here. You both have just given us a whirlwind of lots of activity and lots of diverse activity. And one of the struggles that many of our students face, regardless of whether they're an undergraduate or graduate student studying any discipline within music, is this pressure, sometimes self-imposed and sometimes others imposed, to focus. And the extreme version of that is almost becoming myopic. Like you've got to focus, you've got to do one thing well. And sometimes that's intensified by realizing there is so much to learn about just one thing. I need to go deep. You all, however, have very much in common disparate creative interests and endeavors, and you've just described a wide number of paths. And I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about how that may have contributed to the success that both of you are experiencing at this point. So Maria, let's start with you. Just a glance at your website, you describe yourself as a percussionist, a composer, a public artist, and a creative catalyst, which is a wide range of descriptors to use. And just by looking at the projects you're engaged with, they are incredibly diverse. So how is it that you're able to create and more importantly, sustain a professional life that is so multidimensional without being spread too thin, that jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing? How is that working for you? And what would you share with us about that?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much. So I think when you look at my website, you're actually seeing a catalog of work that has occurred over a decade. And so something really important to realize is that a lot of these different titles have kind of emerged as leaders at one moment or the other at different times. So there's a moment in my life where nonprofit work and teaching at schools and community centers was the kind of 70% of my life, while I'm still thinking about these other pockets of my life. So for me, I've always had this idea of the questions I'm asking, why music and for whom? And there's never one answer. So at one part of my life, why music and for whom might have been touring with an orchestra because I love this music for these people in this concert hall. And that was the 70%. And the 30% was continuing to think about what else can I learn about, like lighting designing, and what can I research here and network. And I think that for me, being able to shift and move into these different spaces, it fulfills me as a human because I have I want to reach people from different perspectives. And I also want to meet people a lot of where they are. as well as I have to be responsive to the economy and the industry at large. So at times there's a really intense interest for, one of my hats, which is public art. Public art is really exciting to Boston right now. One, you can socially distance, it's out in the open air. So there's a lot of projects right now for me taking off in that space. But that doesn't take away from my intense love for percussion and composition. And I think that I feel most fulfilled when I'm continuously challenged and I'm kind of able to dance in a lot of these different spaces. Everything always comes down to doing everything really well, though. And I think, I do focus when I need to on those particular tasks, knowing that in 6 months, I get to refocus and I get to, kind of enrich myself in a different way. And I'm always also surrounding myself with other very, very skilled people. So if I have a vision to use projection mapping, I don't need to be an amazing projection mapper, but I need to know one and I need to know how to talk to that person. So I research enough about their field, talk to them enough for us to have that shared vocabulary, and then we can amplify each other in the process.
Excellent. Thank you for giving us that sense of your journey and where you are. Antoine, you've described similarly wide and varied paths, and I'm fascinated from the perspective. So you have an undergraduate degree in music education. You have 2 master's degrees, one in orchestral conducting, one in clarinet performance, and then a doctoral degree in clarinet performance. So very different focuses to each one of those degree programs. I'm curious as to how, if at all, have those varying focuses, foci, if we wanted to be specific, how have those informed or aided getting you to where it is that you are today, which is experiencing some tremendous success artistically?
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for that question. I first like to start and say that, that versatility in my education really promotes and propels my versatility and my work and interests. Even as a young student in undergrad, I wasn't just focused on the clarinet, but I wanted to learn how to conduct. I wanted to learn how to compose. I took composition lessons. So that type of thinking has followed me throughout my life. And I find that, on a given day, I could be doing all 3 of those things. I could be doing one of those things, and they all kind of intersect with each other in some way. So, for example, I think being an educator as a conductor, one thing that I enjoy doing with the McConnell Art Center is programming and thinking about how the works that I program can inform my audiences, be it about a specific type of music or a composer or a style, or even recently we've seen a lot of social justice issues come up in music. And so that mission of wanting to program women and people of color more than we actually hear has also been something that's driving me. As an instructor of music, I deal with students all the time who have a desire to go off into music education or performance. Currently, I prepared, 2 clarinet students who have applied to a number of schools. Happy to say Ohio State has accepted both of them. So, I'm using my expertise as a clarinetist, but as a music educator or even a conductor to inform those students about their paths and their education and trying to prepare for those interviews. Sometimes my clarinet playing can intersect with my service. So let me say this. So for example, the McConnell Art Center, every year they have a fundraiser, and I donate my time as the orchestra's director to be a part of that. Well, last year they wanted me to play some works by Gershwin. So, I got to go up and actually be a clarinetist while I was doing the job of being basically a leader for an orchestra and an advocate for our arts. So as a clarinetist and conductor, recently I just finished a 3,000 word article for, I'm not going to say the name of the institution yet because it has to get published, but anyway, that drawing on my expertise as a clarinetist and a conductor, it basically poked someone's ears up and was like, hey, maybe you would be a great person to write that article and show your how it influenced you, this person that you're writing about. So yeah, I would say that to answer your question, it could depend on what I'm doing, but usually all 4 of my degrees and the levels intersect in one day and informs me of what to do with my creativity.
Thank you, Antoine. I'm hearing from both of you how curiosity plays out in your life, curious about different endeavors or ways that you can connect with people or issues or ideas, a great reminder for us all. Let's follow this thread of curiosity. Antoine, I was taken with your playing clarinet in service of others. And what I've heard from both of you so far, and of course, I've been blessed to have the opportunity to get to know you a little bit more deeply in preparing for this morning and our conversation here, is both of you deeply value relationships. I hear you use that word a lot. I hear testimony to the fact that relationships are really critical. Maria, you just described it in talking about digital mapping and lighting design and all of those kinds of things. How have you found that building, nurturing, and sustaining healthy professional artistic relationships with others to be in your journey, a critical piece, a not critical piece? Can you talk with us about that? And Antoine, let's start with you this time. Relationships.
Sure. I'll talk about relationships on 2 levels. One is having relationships with mentors, and the other one is basically colleagues, you know, people you work with on the same level. So with mentors, I can tell you that I've had some tough decisions to make with my career over the years. And to be able to call up a past professor and discuss, like, here are my options, this is what I want, but these are my fears if I take this step. You know, it's been such a great thing to have those people who've had maybe some of those similar things happen to them and have lived through those things, be able to articulate what they feel. They may not always can answer the question for you. In fact, maybe it's not their job to decide what you should do, but if they can help lay out, you know, a clear path for you to help you see what you're dealing with, it's just been invaluable to have that. The other thing is working with people that I've gone to school with at Ohio State, or that I met at a conducting workshop, or, you know, some kind of fellowship program. Having these relationships, they help in so many ways, because Maria can tell you this business, you can't do it in a vacuum. And just because you're good at something doesn't mean that someone's going to pick you, you know, all the time. And so having those connections allows for people to be able to speak up for you and validate, yeah, I know this guy. He's a great conductor, and I think he would be wonderful for this program. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't have gotten a job without connections, but you really need to be able to have friendships and work with people in this business.
I love that, Antoine. I mean, friendships and just respect for one another, and just showing that kind of care and kind of kindness to one another can really, really go a long way. I felt that deeply when I jumped into a new city. A lot of you studying will find yourselves relocating, following a job, following family, going back home. And you might feel like, what do I do now? You feel maybe isolated, and you are really good at what you do, and you just want to scream it from the rooftops. And the way you do that is, and the way I did it when I moved to Boston, I knew 2 people. I actually kind of looked up all the people that I went to like marimba camp with and asked old colleagues, like, do you know anyone in Boston? I met a couple of people through just like email introductions. And then I just went to a lot of concerts and art openings and went to events and just respected my peers that had already established themselves in this city, met them, shook their hands, said, hey, I really enjoyed your playing. Your interpretation here was really stunning. I didn't have any gigs for 6 months because I was new. And I was working a job at a conservatory. So my job at that moment was to just meet people and know who's doing what, who's running concert series, who's running the museum performance, vulnerably and honestly and authentically meet them and respect them. And then since then, now I have relationships with a lot of the movers and shakers around town. And the way these large scale works get done is having conversations with those people, because everything, even if it's under the umbrella of a major institution or government entity, is run by humans. And so to have authentic conversation and real relationships with those people, it goes a long way. Absolutely.
Oh, I just have written down my job was to go and meet people and attend things. What a great reminder as well that this is something that takes work and takes effort to make happen. Both of you, thank you for your contributions there. And of course, we are celebrating you two as one of our own, I like to say, today. And of course, your tremendous accomplishments. But I'm imagining, and of course know, that challenges and obstacles and failures have undoubtedly been part of your journey. I'm wondering if you would be willing to share with us the role that challenge or failures or obstacles have played in getting you to where it is that you are today as creative artists. Maria, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to tell a really specific story on this idea of failure and how turning a failure into a moment that has actually catapulted my career in a way I never would have foreseen. I probably, sitting in the chair of a student right now, wouldn't have seen myself as this public artist, multidisciplinary person. My real mission and what I thought I was going to do was play in percussion ensemble and tour the world as a chamber musician. And I did that for a little bit, which was really great in Sweden. And when I was there, we said, okay, let's have like a send-off event, and we're going to create this body of work, and it's going to be kind of our send-off of our percussion trio. We wrote music for these tree houses that were suspended in the woods of Sweden, and we went, and the idea was that we'll take our percussion instruments, we'll go to this venue, and we'll be outside, we'll play this music for this space. Really, it all came together. We got the funding, the permission, etc. And if you would have asked me to define success, if it's a send-off concert, it's out in the middle of the woods, you want hundreds of people there, you envision hundreds of people there, right? That's what success looks like. A week before the show, the venue had the kind of role in our memorandum of understanding, which was essentially our contract, of publicizing and getting people that are going to bus people from the main town, the city, to the woods. Nada, nothing's happening. I'm kind of, we're rehearsing and we're getting everything ready, and we're like, no one's going to be there. And we started to feel that failure kind of, you can feel it on your shoulders. You can feel it. Oh my gosh, we're putting so much energy into this. So what we decided to do, and this was in 2012, so hiring a videographer and a film team was like not really in the ether of what people do. It is now. So what we decided to do is say, okay, let's take a cut in our budget and hire a crew to come and make some videos of this work. So, 5 people came to the show, 5 people. And we were, of course, a bit bummed, but we had reframed success. We said, now our mission is to make videos. So we felt kind of emboldened and excited about that. Then I would want to share, I moved to Boston, and those videos maybe have like 200 views, not a lot. But the people that saw them happened to be artistic directors of festivals in Boston. That is why I got the call to do some projects. If you look at my website, I turned the backside of Fenway Park into a percussion instrument. I harnessed up and played it like a drum set. And the reason I got that gig is because the artistic director saw those videos. And I often think back about this, because if we would have let failure set in, and if we would have said, our definition of success is it's precious, it doesn't move, this is what this project is, I would have lost, I hypothesize that I wouldn't have gotten these connections here in Boston. I wouldn't have had that kind of exposure to my work and trust in new colleagues that I can do outside of the box thinking. So what I share with you is that failure is going to happen, period. It will. It happens all the time. And there's many different levels of that. But if you can train yourself to anticipate it or see it, or at least let go of the preciousness of what you see success as, you can really turn any moment into a learning experience and a catapult into something. And that learning might not be apparent right away. Like the next day, I was still pretty bummed there was only 5 people there, let's be honest. But now in hindsight, I can see that kind of that push to make that experience as best it could be was essential to where I am today.
Okay, I'm here, sorry. So I think of 3 things that I was involved in, or 3 things I applied for that they didn't work out for me the first time. but I had a second chance. And I basically learned from the first time I applied for it and was able to make something out of that second chance. So I applied for the Chicago Sinfonietta's fellowship program. I think this had to be 2016. Yeah. I didn't get in. In 2017, I interviewed for the Northern Ohio Youth Orchestra philharmonia position. I didn't get that. And in 2018, I auditioned for the Buffalo Philharmonic assistant conductor position, and I didn't get that. So here's the story. I reapplied to the Chicago Sinfonietta. I tightened up my application. I really worked on my story, my personal narrative. I was really honest about the struggles in my life, and I improved my conducting. Those things stood out for them, and they then accepted me the second time. Because of getting that position, I was able to work with the program, and they really help you with interview skills. In fact, they take you into a fancy, like high tower, like huge building in Chicago, and you can see all of downtown, you know, and you eat lunch, and they basically treat you like you were in an interview for a major position. That interview really just taught me so much about how, that process taught me so much about how to interview, that when the job for the Northern Ohio Youth Orchestra came up, I did much better and won that position. I also learned from the failure of that position. Luckily, the executive director at the time told me, he was like, yeah, you did a great job, but here are the things that we would have liked to have seen. And I improved upon those bullet points for that second interview. And then for the Buffalo Phil job, I actually got called back to audition for a second time for that job. I didn't win it, and that's okay. But what happened was, in the interview process, after you actually worked with the orchestra, they had a question for me. So how do you think you've grown in 6 months? And the executive director at that time basically yells out, it was amazing. Like, you know, he really saw my growth from earlier that year to later that year, because they had 2 auditions. So basically those things really taught me that failure sharpens your abilities. It helps you refocus yourself and to understand what you need to do in order to get these jobs sometimes. And sometimes failure is not bad, because maybe the job that you thought you wanted maybe wasn't the right job. And I've learned that too.
Oh, thank you both. Really rich advice. And thanks as well for just being so vulnerable and open with us in that regard. For those of you who have gathered online here, if you would like and have questions for our panelists, feel free to go ahead and toss those in the Q&A. We're going to explore one more question here, and then we'll get to some of your questions that are in that part of the chat window. If you don't mind me poking and prodding a little bit more in terms of the vulnerability, you have both described rich professional lives, extraordinarily busy ones and multidimensional ones, but I also know that both of you have very satisfying personal lives. And I wonder if you would share with us the importance of, and maybe also the challenges of, sustaining a balance between the professional you and the family you. And Antoine, do you mind, can we start with you?
Sure. This question makes me think all the way back to Nebraska. I just graduated from Ohio State, and I was happy that, you know, I graduated in 2009, and by the spring of 2010, I had landed a job. It was a big thing for me to get a doctorate and then make it work. At the time, I was dating my husband, who was my partner, who was like boyfriend at the time. And we had been together maybe 10 months. So we were serious, but not to the point where, hey, I'm gonna pick up and move to Nebraska and you should come with me. The other thing was he had elderly parents who were in their 80s, and we were trying to figure out, you know, this is an interim job. It may not work out. I may not wanna stay. They may not want me. So you hang back and we'll date long distance. So you know, basically some of that decision on whether to stay in Nebraska, not all of it, but some of it was dealing with my family life. Is this going to be something that would be good for my husband? And I'm thinking about him because, you know, he has to pick up and move, and he has two elderly parents who could need him at any moment. So I felt that with a lot of things, if I'm not 100% about this, I'm definitely not going to make the man of my dreams move all the way across the country to do something that might not be good for either of us in the long run. So, and through that process, I also learned that it's great to have titles. Everyone wants to be thought of as the assistant or the major, you know, you're the conductor. But when it comes down to it, your life and your happiness is just important. And I needed to feel good about where I was and who I was in that space.
And I just second that. That's so beautiful, Antoine. And I feel it wholeheartedly. Like, I'm a human first, and I do have moments of success based on my artistic career, and those are just superlative to the human, who I am as a human. And that just, you know, that means being a good wife, a good mother, a good daughter, a good friend. You know, I as a woman in percussion and composition and production, you know, I've had to face a lot in that terms of like gender bias, and I actually didn't date within the industry for a long time because I just felt like I can't be connected to somebody and seen as that person. And I think that once I kind of shook that off a little bit and said, okay, you know, I just need to be happy. I can't say, you know, here's the square I'm going to fit into. I need to actually just embrace my whole self, was a really pivotal moment. It really happened when I was here in Boston. And I did meet my husband here. He's a photographer, and he runs his own small business. And really for me, what was extremely important was that he embraced and supported a woman entrepreneur who is really attacking my career full on. And we are both doing that concurrently. I had never imagined, I never imagined kids in my life until I did. And then I did. And I was like, yes, I'm ready. You know, I would love to have a small human in my life and take care of that little person. And so I have a 2-year-old. And you know, where 10 years ago that might not have been a thought, it's because 10 years ago it didn't need to be a thought. And to be a whole human 10 years ago, it meant about, you know, creating this rich network and kind of fulfilling myself and trying to be a citizen of the world and someone who is respectful and kind. And I still want to be a citizen of the world, respectful and kind. And I also want to be a mother. And that's, you know, I think you can ask yourself, and you can embrace different stages of your life and also respect the different stages of other people's lives. So I'm going to respect someone who chooses to have a family and chooses not to have a family. And I think that's really important that we do that all together. And know that even though I do spend a lot of my time taking care of my daughter, I'm still a very focused creator and very, you know, passionate creator. And it's my job to find the time to do those things. And I will decide how to balance that internally, as long as I have the respect from, you know, my peers. And I do. I also have, you know, my husband, we are a 50-50 partnership. Absolutely. The pandemic has been very hard, but we've definitely had moments where I said, you need to go do your thing, I'll take the childcare. He says, you need to do your thing, I'll take on the childcare. And finding that partner has been a really important journey for me. But we are all humans, so be happy, be a happy human, and remember that the art is better if you're a happy human.
Thank you so much. All right, let's get to some of your questions. Again, feel free to just toss them into the Q&A portion of the site as we go. The first one is going to harken back to the discussion earlier about reaching out to mentors, about asking for potentially advice, and perhaps maybe more specifically to like the first couple of times that you do that, and perhaps wrestling with this feeling of being in an imposition, like, oh my gosh, I know this person's really busy. Do they really even have time? Should I? Do you have any advice for that moment for a young student who might be reaching out for advice for the very first time? And either of you can just unmute and hop in.
Sure, I'll start first if that's okay. I think for my own personal experiences, generally the people that I've reached out to for me have been people that I felt like I had a safe space with when I was younger. Like, so it's hard to sometimes think about all the way back. You know, I have one of my education directors, but yeah, I think that if you feel comfortable around that person, just try, you know, shoot them an email. You know, a lot of times your educator, most of the time, I would say all the time, your educators are there for you and know that you're going to have these questions. So it's okay. Just be respectful. Say, you know, whenever you're available, I would love to ask or run a question by you, and just open it up that way. Maria?
Yeah, I do remember this feeling of, oh, can I reach out? Like, I know they're busy. I feel that a lot too, because I have to do a lot of cold emails and cold calls. But I think saying this is your value doesn't weigh on whether that person responds. So if you don't reach out, you'll not get a response. If you do reach out, you will probably, you're like 95% going to get a response because we really care about you. But there's 5% that, for example, my daycare is closed, I'm doing this, my elderly, parent is sick, and I can't get to your email for 3 weeks, and I don't even have the time to say I'm sorry. So there are those moments that happen. And what I would say is, if you had never emailed, you would never be on my radar. And 3 weeks later, I wouldn't respond. And also, if I don't respond right away, it's only because there's something in my life that is not allowing me to. It does not have anything to do with the value, and you're not imposing on any mentor. You're actually fulfilling the mentor's like dear love for helping you out. And there might just be some extenuating circumstances that don't allow that mentor. You're not imposing on them though. There's kind of life behind the walls and behind the screen sometimes. So just remind yourself, like, if I don't call, no one's going to call. And my value doesn't, weigh on the response of this person.
Thank you both so much. All right, our next question has to do with core values. I'll let that sit for a second and let you organize your thinking. The question has to do with, would you mind sharing one or maybe two of the core values that have guided you throughout the course of your career? And perhaps, Antoine, could we start with you?
Sure.
Core value?
Sure. The core value that comes to mind when I think about it right away is integrity. I think, that I have to have integrity to the work that I'm doing, be it studying my score enough that I make sure that I understand it and I can go before the musicians and perform it and help them understand it. Integrity to my private students, where I try to give all my knowledge to them. It's just so many levels of what I do that I feel like I have to be honest and open and serious and there for the people I come in contact with. And if I don't have any integrity, if I don't have a desire to make sure I'm giving my all for them, then I feel like my art suffers because of that.
Definitely agree with you, Antoine. I love that word, integrity. And another kind of value that always comes to mind is authenticity and authentic making and authentic storytelling. I think at the core of creators, we are, whether you're composing, conducting, performing, dancing, animating, writing, we're all storytellers in some way. And what we bring is your specific authentic voice. So I've done a lot of trial and error to get to what is your authentic voice. And I think that's okay. But now when I'm, and hopefully always when I'm approaching projects, that core value of, is this authentic to me? Is this something that I should take on? Is this a story I can tell? Is this a story I should tell? How would I tell this story in this authentic, vulnerable way with integrity? I think, just reminding ourselves that we are citizens of the world and we are portals of art and creativity and story. So making sure we're doing ways that are kind of unique and vulnerable and authentic to each one of us.
Thank you both. Our next question has to do with teaching. Teaching has been an integral part of the work that both of you do. And wonder if you wouldn't mind just sharing some of the ways, a few ways that teaching has informed your creative work. Maria, can we just bounce it right back to you?
Sure, absolutely. So I've had the privilege to teach in many different levels. So I'm teaching like electronic bucket drumming to community centers and like 5-year-olds to 12-year-olds. I teach entrepreneurship at Berklee College of Music and marketing at Northeastern. So those are collegiate level, also teaching private lessons. And teaching is also just an extension of communication strategies. And what I love is that I learn different ways to communicate through those teaching endeavors. So if I am trying to wrangle 10, 12-year-olds to play on buckets, there's these strategies of communication, of bringing joy, bringing respect to them, bringing kind of center focus that I feel like I can bring to the stage when I'm performing as well. Like, how do I treat the audience like it's those 10 rambunctious young people and bring them into this space to focus and to embrace the story that I'm telling? I think thinking creatively on how to express abstract ideas is essentially what we do. And when I'm standing in front of a group of people, I do that through words. And when I'm standing on stage, I do that through notes on a page. And so there's definitely, this practice of presenting. And of course I use my arms a lot. This practice of, this is the gesture I use to play as well. So it's all me, whether I'm using words or whether I'm using percussion. But what I love and what has been so important to keep teaching as an extremely high priority in my practice is that I'm learning different ways to communicate what we are trying to communicate through art. I feel like we're enriching the next generation of concert and art goers. And also I'm learning a lot about new generations, what people are thinking, how people are thinking, and then how I can need to adjust what I'm saying and doing based on all of these different ideas that are coming in the generations after. So I love teaching. I think an artist, teacher, performer, conductor, like all of these things, they go together to create, our best selves in each one of those pockets.
For me, what comes to mind is that phrase that I used earlier, which is conductor as educator, or I think I said something like that. One of the things I love about our patrons at the McConnell Arts Center in Worthington is that while our patrons love the music and the experience, they always come up to me later and say, I learned so much from you when you talked about what to expect in the piece. Or, if I go over a concept, it doesn't have to be anything crazy, over one's head, but just giving them a little bit of information about what they're going to listen to really just makes that experience even more special for them. And so that's one thing I like in my business, in my job, is that while I'm an artist, I still can inform and educate others. And that just is a great thing.
Thank you both. We're going to try to squeeze one more question in here before we'll need to wrap up. And time has, just as we predicted, has just flown by with the two of you. So thank you as well. This one has to do with courage about big decisions. Both of you have described big decisions. Antoine, you mentioned about leaving Nebraska, coming back to Central Ohio. Maria, you talked about going to Sweden. And the question specifically is, how do you find that courage? Where's the validation in that moment in which a big decision is about to be made and I really think this is right? A huge question, of course, but do you have any things that you might share for students who are on the cusp of maybe decisions like that? We've got about 2 minutes total. Ready, set, go.
I'll keep it really brief, is to say that big decisions will yield big reward. But also the bookends of your life, because you're used to living in bookends, right? School, 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 and then world. And what's interesting is you can make a decision and then you can make a new decision if that decision didn't work. And that's kind of how, when I moved to Sweden, I cried the whole night before. What am I doing? Oh my gosh, this is insane. I said, you're going to try it for a semester. I ended up being there for 3 years, and that was great. And then I made a new decision and took another risk, because you have the capacity and the ability to drive your life and your career. And for me, if I didn't go to Sweden, I wouldn't have been open. I wouldn't have learned. I had failures, all of those things. And it's really about understanding that your life is from X to beyond, and you can make a lot of new decisions.
I agree with Maria on that point. Yeah, and the Nebraska situation is basically what I went through. I I moved to another part of the country, loved the people, loved the students, but there were other factors that, played a role that I didn't really think about, and I had to make another decision. And believe me, it was not easy after I made that decision. I cried, I was upset, I gave away a big job. And you know what? I am thankful I gave up that job because my life is so much fuller and richer in all the things that I'm doing. And I'm sure a lot of that would continue to happen in my life.
Well, thank you. As I mentioned to both of you, time has just passed so quickly, but I want to, in our remaining minute together, to look you both in the eye here as best I can on a webcam in this format, and let you know just how deeply proud we are of you at Ohio State in both the School of Music and university-wide, the College of Arts and Sciences, of course, too, and how proud we are of not only what you're doing, but the people that you are, the difference that you're making through your lives as human beings connected deeply and committed profoundly to the arts. We are so thankful to be able to call you both one of our own at Ohio State. And we just look forward to checking in with you at times in the future to learn about even all the more wonderful and tremendous things that are going on in the course of your life. We are just really super proud of you both. So thank you for giving of your time today. We're really, really thankful people, especially in this moment. To Dr. Crocetta, Professor Crocetta, and to all of the folks at the Barnett Center, thank you so much for the privilege of having the opportunity to dialogue today. And I will now turn this over to Professor Crocetta. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Scott. I just want to say, we talked, we had a little planning meeting, Scott and I, about a week ago or so, and we were just talking about this Buddhist notion of right livelihood, which is to find a way to be in the world that's in alignment with your ethics, but that where you're able to use all of your gifts in the world and in a way that you're in your flow. And this is not an easy balance always to strike, but what I'm hearing is so encouraging for both Maria and Antoine that they are in fact, actively pursuing and achieving this balance of right livelihood and realizing that it's not a fixed position, that it's about saying yes to things and being willing to say no to things when they don't work for you within your family structure or your life goals, that kind of thing. And that goals can change and that they should and that they do. So thank you so much, everyone, for being with us today. I want to encourage you. Yes, thank you. This is such an amazing conversation. I'm going to be floating for the rest of the day. I want to encourage you all to join us for the next Creative Pathfinders event, which is going to be happening with the Department of Design next Wednesday, February 17th from 8:00 p.m. till 9:00 p.m. And even if you're in this audience now and you think, but I'm not a designer, I encourage you to join us because you can learn so much pearls of wisdom from our alumni and help us to celebrate their many accomplishments. So thank you again and have a beautiful afternoon.